Hello, welcome to Loomus Academy. I'm Faristamo Eller, and today we are talking about pets, about positive list, about different animals people like to keep as pets, and also about animals, especially wild animals, who should not be kept as pets or companion animals to people. With me here is Nicholas Clark, and he will be telling a little bit about himself in a second. So, hello, Nicholas.
All right, so my name's Nick Clark. I'm Wildlife Program Leader at Eurogroup for Animals. Been an animal advocate privately my whole life, but as an advocate professionally, I started at Eurogroup for Animals over a year ago now, and I have a background in zoology and human ecology, which is the idea of bringing together different stakeholders from different areas with differing opinions and using science and open discussion to really make policy decisions. So that's where my background is. And I was a high school teacher for 10 years of science and biology in particular. So it's been quite a journey to get here, and I'm absolutely loving what I'm doing. And so, yeah, we work on all sorts of topics, but one of the major topics we work on right now is the exotic pet trade, and trying to regulate it across the European Union with an EU-wide positive list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very important thing to do, because in Estonia we see that laws do not regulate this part at all, and basically you can have a pet, whoever you want, even a lion, if a lion is not born in a wild. So the lion has to be born in where?
In captivity. And,
yeah, exactly.
There's private breeders. There's all sorts of things going on. I mean, our member Four Paws work a lot on tiger breeding facilities, where those tigers are actually sold to Southeast Asia, sometimes for pets, but more often, sadly, for traditional medicines and things.
Yeah,
they're coming from Europe, and it's bizarre because, you know, you have CITES 1 listed species, CITES being the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. And of course, you can't take those animals from the wild and sell them. That's prohibited. But if those same animals are bred in captivity, like you say, then under certain conditions, they can be.
Exactly. In Estonia, it was before Christmas, someone took a lynx as a pet. And it's insane. They say, yeah, but you know, it's somehow, you know, homey, whatever, not a wild. But how can you do that, right?
Well, it's this huge distinction that people often they misunderstand, which is the difference between domesticating and taming animals. You know, wild animals can be tamed, but that doesn't mean that they don't still have their natural instincts, their natural needs, their behavioral needs. It just means that usually through fear and through training, they've come to learn that they can't do certain things around humans. But that can go horribly wrong. I mean, a lynx it's not a big cat, but it's a mid-sized cat, wild cat, very powerful animal, incredibly sharp claws, incredibly sharp teeth. And they can cause real danger and damage to people. And what happens when that animal escapes? I mean, think about the damage that animal can do to other people's beloved pets, but more importantly, to the local biodiversity and wildlife. I mean, it's an incredibly skilled hunter. So it can cause a lot of damage if it escapes.
But do you know what is what is stopping these kind of laws in different countries, so that right now in Netherlands there is this positive list from this summer where it's 30 animals you can have as pet, but why isn't it widespread in Europe that every country would have that list?
Oh, that is a great question. Well, firstly, if I knew the answer to that question, I'd be out of a job very quickly. So we'd be done and dusted. But even in these countries that have a positive list, sometimes the positive list is not yet enforced. So, for example, in the Netherlands, it's coming into force in 2024. So they have the list, and that's part of the challenge. So I'll try and split this up into two ways, because there's social and political challenges, and there's also technical challenges. So in order to arrive at a positive list, you have to think about, but which of course is a list of the animals that you are allowed to keep and trade, rather than the animals you're not allowed to, like a big long negative list like many countries have. But the question is, how do you design that list? How do you make that list? So why is the list in the Netherlands 30 animals? Why are those 30 animals allowed to be traded and kept and not others? And that can be a really technical challenge. For example, with the Netherlands, they assessed around 300 mammal species, just over that number. And it took several years to do so, because they're really scientifically checking the welfare needs of the animals. So it's can the animal be kept in small areas, you know, inside a household? Very rarely are you going to let the animal free the whole time, depending on the animal. If it has certain conditions, is it nocturnal? Does it require specific dietary conditions? Temperature-wise, I mean, if it's an animal that comes from the tropics, being in the Netherlands, for example, or Estonia, it's going to be extremely difficult to maintain that level of temperature all year round. You know, and what happens when the animal escapes? So could it be potentially invasive, meaning that or if it's an alien invasive species, it would be a species that comes from outside the natural area that animal comes from into a new one. And then if it becomes actually invasive, then it starts to cause damage to the biodiversity in that area. So is there potential for that? Could it carry zoonotic disease risks, which many mammals do? I mean, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has obviously set everybody's alarm bells ringing when it comes to zoonotic disease transfer, because it's very likely that the COVID-19 pandemic was started in a wet market, you know, from different animals living on top of each other, being able to transfer diseases between each other, and then being handled by humans, which of course means a zoonotic disease is a disease that can go from animals into humans, and in fact the other way around. So all these things need to be considered, but how do you consider it? Do you just get a couple of interested stakeholders around the table and make a list after a conversation, or do you systematically assess based on a risk assessment that has been developed and really takes time to develop an expertise? And so one reason is the limited resources that nations might have and a reluctance to put the effort into making the list. What they're forgetting is that once you have this list, the list is future-proof. It's something that will simplify legislation and simplify enforcement, and of course have added value in all of the areas that we've talked about: animal welfare, zoonotic disease transfer, invasiveness, conservation, all these areas. So it's a classic political game. Politicians are not willing to put in the short-term effort for a long-term goal, you know. So that's one reason. The other reason is that actually when we think about how many pets we're keeping in the European Union or in different countries, currently, it's damn hard to know how many pets are being traded. You know, we have members at Eurogroup for Animals, we have members all over Europe, and it is extremely difficult to get government information because the government are not monitoring this specifically. When you talk about domesticated pets like cats and dogs, we now have pet passports and identification and registration, for example. But even that is a challenge. So imagine trying to do that for all of the huge variety of different animals that you can currently keep. You've mentioned tigers and lions, but there's also exotic bird species, macaws, these gigantic, beautiful creatures that, you know, all the way down to different kinds of parakeets, ornamental fish,
Exactly.
reptiles, snakes. How can we, and when you're allowed to cross borders within the European Union without being checked, which is obviously a good thing, we need to be able to do that, but that inherently means that animals can be transported without being checked. And so it causes all sorts of confusion in terms of the statistics on how many animals we have. And that can cause a problem because it means that some countries are not really able to prove that they should have a positive list or not. And that can be really, really difficult. Although we believe, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest the numbers of these animals are enormous, in the millions or tens of millions of animals being kept and traded as pets, or exotic animals, I should say, wild animals being kept and traded as pets, that we should have a precautionary approach. And member states should be making a positive list, even if they don't have this, all of this data, all this information. You know, and because inherently there are really important issues that can be solved by a positive list that can't be solved by, you know, any of these other regulatory methods. If you want, we can talk about some of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this positive list, because now when Netherlands has it, it could be easier for others to do it, because I understand that, of course, maybe in Italy and in Estonia, the climate is a little bit different, so a little bit different animals can feel well, but basically the basis could be the same, right? Absolutely.
I mean, you know, this is why across Europe, we should be sharing good practice. We're a European Union. There's so many things that we do that can be shared, that can be harmonized across different countries. And you know, to put it this way, Belgium has a positive list right now, and Poland doesn't, let's say. Not to single out a single country, but we've just done an investigation of online trade where we've you know, we've found marmosets, small primates that are legal. You're allowed them in Poland, but you're not allowed them in Belgium. They are not on the positive list in Belgium, so they are illegal to be kept. However, online, a person that's sitting here in Belgium can go online, and the person who's legally selling these animals is in Poland. So is that legal or is that illegal? Very, very tricky question. And of course, it's a long drive, but you can drive up to Poland, go and get your animal that you've legally bought, and then you can illegally keep it in Belgium. And it's very difficult to enforce that. But if Poland and Belgium had the same regulation, God, that would make it so much harder to do that illegally. At least much easier to monitor what was legal or illegal. And so, yes, sharing these good practices is really important. But there are some countries, member states in the European Union, that are quite reluctant to do this for the reasons we mentioned earlier. That's difficult. And they might already have a long negative list of animals that they prohibit. And they like their list. They like their rules, and it's difficult to change. So that's the reason that we strongly believe that an EU-wide positive list is the way forward, because there are countless animals suffering. That's the primarily the main reason why you would want to regulate the pet trade. There's wild animals that have their instincts from the wild, their needs from the wild, whether they were born in captivity or not. And these animals are difficult or impossible to keep in a household. And you might have one or two complete experts who have the money, the facilities, the time to be able to do it. But that's a very big difference between those people maybe having a license to be able to keep these animals, and just you or I or you know, anybody that sees an Instagram post and goes, oh, that's a cute you know, flying marsupial. I want to, or a sugar glider, for example, beautiful animal. I completely empathize with the people that see these videos online and they go, oh, wouldn't it be great to have one of these? The same thought crosses my mind. And then I have to think to myself, but actually that's pleasing me. That's not pleasing the animal in any way.
Yeah, it's like these photo shoots, what they do with wild animals, for example, like big lizards kind of animals, or the same lynx I was telling you, they kind of sell it as a pleasure, or like animals in circus. Of course, it's maybe not so badly done, but still you just use this animal for your own feeling good.
Your own gratification. It's a status symbol. I mean, there's a lot of videos you find of people hiring fast cars, you know?
Yeah.
They hire fast cars and they go, yeah, look at me. And they also hire exotic animals to put in the fast cars. It's so wow. They're sitting there and they're like, look how exotic I am, because I've got these special rare things. And you know, we're as humans, we're always drawn to rarity. You know, rarity makes us special. Rare diamonds, blood diamonds, where people have suffered immensely to get these incredibly rare things, and they become valuable. In the same investigation that we conducted online, which is being published in a few months, we found a sloth online for sale. I mean, this species of sloth is not an endangered species, but it's incredibly rare to have in Europe. And there was absolutely no check on the person buying, who was our investigators, but we didn't buy the animals, by the way, just to be sure about that. But it's one of the first investigations that actually looks into what happens when you go beyond seeing what's in the advert. You know, what can you actually achieve by buying this animal? Where will they sell it to? What information will they give you? And they knew that we wanted to buy this as a pet animal, not for a zoo, not for you know, some kind of well maintained sanctuary or rescue center. No, it was for our own pleasure in a household, and it's absolutely mad.
Can you tell a little bit more about this investigation? What was it about?
Yeah, so I'll give the big picture, because it forms part of a series of reports that are coming out very soon. So it's a crunch time in the European Union right now in terms of policy. There's animal welfare legislation being revised right now for the first time in a long time, and it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. At the same time, last year, regarding the positive list, we had 19 member states support the idea of finding out how good an EU-wide positive list could be through a feasibility study. And we had the Parliament make 2 motions for resolution, which were adopted. So 2 resolutions in the European Parliament on an EU-wide positive list of allowed pets. So politically, there's all this support, and at the same time, the the European Commission is revising animal welfare legislation. Now, these two things have traditionally been separated because when we talk about positive list of exotic pets, let's say, these are wild animals. And the animal welfare side of things, there's wild animals are very rarely considered in EU legislation for animal welfare. It's more domesticated animals, farm animals, traditionally companion animals, and there's no animal welfare legislation regarding pets. Doesn't exist at an EU-wide level. And so there's this opportunity here. So what we're doing is we're finalizing, actually my deadline is today, this a white paper which brings together all of these ideas, all of the problems that the current pet trade has, the feasible solution, so a legal way that this can be done, because as I mentioned before, it's quite challenging. So we need to think about legal ways that it's proportional. So the problem is bad enough to have this systematic change as a solution. The idea of subsidiarity, the fact that member states themselves, even if nearly all member states had a positive list, it would still, those lists could still be undermined by the legal trade of wild animals in another member state, because then, you know, they can escape and cause invasive risk or zoonotic risk in other countries, or they can just be sold in cash across, and very difficult to monitor. So an EU-wide list is the reason. And so we have a legal opinion that's done by a completely separate organization, not an animal welfare organization, who have demonstrated that there are ways of having an EU-wide positive list that has a legal basis in the EU, could be WTO, which is World Trade Organization compliant, and could be a very effective list based on animal welfare, among other things. And so this report is coming together. And at the same time, we have done investigations into how many animals are really being imported into different member states in the EU, and the fact that different rules in different member states might be affecting the amount of imports coming in to different member states, which is trying to piece together the lack of data that we have. Of course, we will not manage to solve that question, but to show the idea that, look, where there's smoke, there's fire. So we're trying to show that, look, there's a problem here. We need a solution, which is the positive list. And one of those investigations was by an organization called Sapiens, who is a fantastic organization, and they do mystery interviews, and which is a great way to find out the real truth behind what's really going on. So yeah, they posed as buyers online, and really engaged in conversation with people who were selling different animals. And it was eye-opening. It was only a small investigation, but completely eye-opening. I mean, we have golden eagles being sold. Yeah, scarlet ibis, a sloth, like I mentioned, marmosets, which are legal in some places and illegal in others. A real mix of a huge variety of animals. And the key part of that investigation was to find out what information is the buyer receiving. Because if I'm going to look after a marmoset or a sloth, how do you look after a sloth? You know, I have absolutely no idea. And the fact is, you probably can't look after a sloth effectively in the household. That's the key. But these people, they when doing the adverts, the sellers do not give information about how to look after the animal. Certainly not accurate information. They don't give you information about whether it's legal or illegal. Sometimes they know about CITES permits. So CITES is this convention that I mentioned before. And they mention the permits, but do you have to have one? They may well sell it without the permit. Anyway, and And so, of course, we couldn't go that far because we were never going to buy the animal. So that there's some assumptions there. But, you know, the fact is that this is completely unregulated. I was at an event for just cats and dogs 2 days ago. And the problem of the online trade, the European Commission say, well, you know, the internet's so huge, we could never possibly monitor the whole thing. Well, unfortunately, in that case, we need stricter rules to be able to make it easier to monitor.
Yes.
I mean, it's not simple, but it's not rocket science either. You know, it just takes a different frame of mind legally and a different frame of mind from the public as well. And you know, at the moment, we still see wild animals as a commodity, as a thing that we can use and do what we want with. We have this kind of view of the natural world of dominance. We dominate the natural world when really we should be having one of stewardship, care, and respect.
Yeah, this is the thing that when animals, like let's say fishes, or cats, when they somehow are design elements, you go to a lobby and there is this big kind of screen, but it's actually aquarium with fishes. Or I have heard that people go to take cats and they say, you know, I need this kind of gray because my sofa is like that. Like, what kind of thinking is that?
It's bizarre. We had a family friend, I won't mention their name, who we would joke because they got a rare breed of white cat, specifically because they had white curtains.
Oh wow!
We were thinking this is crazy, but this idea of I don't know what we might call them, design animals, let's say. You know, what people forget is the specific way we breed these animals to look a certain way can cause huge physiological and morphological and neurological disorders in these animals that affect their welfare in a terrible way. With the bull python, a really gorgeous animal, the wild type, the natural animal, it's not a really colorful animal, but they're bred to have these color morphs, which are aesthetically beautiful things. You know, they're beautiful things, but I don't find them beautiful because it's not a natural state for the animal, and they can suffer from neurological disorders because the genes are, I don't want to get too technical. Also, I'm not an expert in this field, but you know, physiological and aesthetic appearances can be linked to other genetic things within the body or within the brain. So you can cause unknown problems.
Exactly. And now the education or educational part, when kids see that, wow, animals are like around us, but we can do whatever we want with them. That gives this kind of knowledge to another generation that, as you said before, that we are kind of the leaders, but we shouldn't be.
You are totally right, and it's everywhere. I mentioned at the beginning that I used to be a teacher, and I've always cared for animal welfare, but I haven't always been as knowledgeable about animal welfare as I am now. And you know, even in my own practice, I would have done things differently now, knowing how damaging some of these simple things can be. And you know, we see it all the time. You might have class trips to the zoo. Now, I'm not saying that there's a problem with all zoos. I won't get into that argument now, although it's really interesting. But there are some zoos that are completely inappropriate. And you take kids there, and the kids are petting the animals. They're taking selfies with the animals. I didn't do this, by the way, but they're taking selfies with the animals, and the kids are having a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And what are they learning? you know, exactly what you said. They're not learning factual information about the way these animals live in the wild.
Yeah.
They're learning that, oh, great, I can take this animal and get a picture for me with this animal. That's what they take away from this. You know, a great example of learning, it's a bit off topic, but a great example of wrong learning or negative learning comes from dolphin shows or seal shows, you know. There was actually a PhD, I'm sorry, I forget the author's name, but there was a PhD done on this with sea lions. And they did a questionnaire of people going into sea lion shows before and after they came out. And they actually demonstrated negative learning from this show. People had thought that the whiskers of these animals help to balance balls on their noses. That's the purpose of these whiskers. And, you know, if we're sending adults as well, I mean, not just children, but if we're sending people to these shows and they're coming out thinking that these animals are enjoying being used by us in inappropriate ways, it's really a terrible message.
I have read also that now coming back to pets, that it is environmentally also very bad, this kind of trading, because you actually can't track so well if they or if these animals are somehow from the wild and then brought to this selling business, basically.
Yes. Even with it, I mean, the global trade is a disaster. But even within the European Union, the trade is awful, because there's several things that are happening. One is that these CITES permits that you get, it's a certificate, they can be forged, and they very often are. Had an interview at Europol, which is the one of these institutions that is helping with criminal investigations at a cross-border level at the EU. And they demonstrate in their latest report as well that forgeries of CITES documents is a huge issue. Now, what happens is that very often these animals are said that they are captively bred, which from a conservation perspective might be okay. From a welfare perspective, absolutely not. But from a conservation perspective, there are arguments to suggest that captive breeding could be some kind of solution. But they're actually taken from the wild, but they're mislabeled as captively bred. So the idea that there are captively bred animals causes a demand for more animals in the pet trade, because they're available. If there's supply, there's demand, and the other way around. If there's demand, there's supply. And then from the wild, these animals are being taken to feed. They're taken from the wild directly for the trade, but also if you have captively bred animals, their genetic diversity will go down very, very quickly if you're interbreeding the same animals. So you need to take animals from the wild in order to feed the genetic diversity of these breeds. Again, back to the ball python, the same thing happens in ranching, where these animals are taken, eggs often are taken from the wild and kind of put in these ranches. And it's extremely destructive. Then there's also gaps in our legislation. For example, this is crazy that this is a fact, but animals can be illegally taken from the country of origin, smuggled into the EU, and then because of our lack of harmonized rules, they can be traded legally once they're here. And
that's sad.
It's absolutely astonishing. So you might get, I'm trying to think of an example, but lava lizards, let's say, some types of animals that are endangered in a local area. So they might not be CITES listed because they might be recently endangered, let's say, but they might be illegal from the local laws, the the local region, but then they're illegally smuggled, brought here, and they can be sold in pet shops even. You know, it's completely legal. It's bizarre. So yes, in terms of the environment, there's huge issues. Not to mention the fact that we often, for the pet trade, it's the largest or most colourful individuals that you might take, and if it's a species of animal that lives in a family unit, what happens when you take an important member of that family unit? You know, it might be a big family like a herd or a mob, or but you can cause all sorts of behavioral changes within that unit, and then what happens? Those animals might not be able to survive as well in their natural habitat without that key individual. All sorts of really terrible things are as a consequence of this pet trade, so that we can have an animal. And you mentioned ornamental fish as a kind of piece of artwork in the corner. I mean, honestly, it's, you know, there's some people say that it's beneficial because it relaxes people and these kinds of things. But if a screen with similar images or you know, beautiful landscapes can also relax people just as much. And I feel there's a big difference between companion animals and other exotic pets, let's say. And this is a really important difference, because I don't think that having a snake in the corner of your room that you look at and maybe take out once a day, or you know, I'm not sure how many times people take their animals out, that is not the same level of companionship for either animal. And the snake does not want to be your companion. That's the other difference. A dog or a cat, very willing to be your companion, and a cat that can go out and chooses to come back is a very different situation to a snake that might go out and
never come back.
Never come back, you know. And it's more like a piece of art.
Yeah.
That you have in your house, a symbol, a status symbol, like we mentioned before. And you know, you see it all the time in films. There's every time you watch an American film, and they have a teenage boy usually, and in their room they've got a sort of big glass cage with an exotic reptile or snake, or you know, sometimes tarantulas and things, and it just normalizes it so much. And you think, oh, that's a cool kid in a cool room because he's got this, he's in the movies, so everybody must want that.
Yeah,
I remember
exactly.
wanting one when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah. The last topic I will take here for maybe a few minutes is
Yes.
Many people say that because there are so many endangered species, we as people have right to take them and to somehow help them. And that's one of my question, maybe, that we again take the right to decide what is best for another species or for this one animal, even though we have made everything so that they wouldn't have even place to live.
Yeah. Well, you've nailed it, because the first thing you have to do is take a step back and say, like, what behavioral changes can we make to make sure that the conditions that led to those animals being endangered doesn't take place. So we need to stop destroying their habitats, you know, thinking big picture. We need to stop destroying their habitats, change the way we eat or what we want. You know, should we have a house with a big garden, all those kinds of things, because we just encroach into natural wildlife areas. So that's one thing. The way we live is causing these problems for them to be endangered. So really, the right shouldn't be us deciding, oh, we should inject into this little bit and take those animals away to save them. That's, you know, it's a very human-centric approach still, because we want to carry on doing all the things that we normally do that cause those problems in the first place. So that's a really big thing. Very difficult to change the minds of everybody to really change the way we live in those situations. So when the argument comes then, okay, are we going to take these animals away and then breed them for conservation purposes? We have to be very, very careful. I am sure that there are some circumstances that I can support interventions, you know, of humans coming in and maybe taking some, if those animals can be reintroduced to the wild, for example, if all of their needs are genuinely cared for. But using pets as the example for that, we have to remove pets from the conversation, because the purpose of a pet is for human companionship, or let's say, or for being kept in a household. And having these unregulated breeders that might claim that they are doing things for conservation, it takes an awful lot of expertise to breed an animal properly. You know, and many people, or I'd say many people, there are people who do have these expertise, but when it comes to the pet trade, they're using that knowledge to change the species to be a better pet, a more attractive pet, let's say, rather than actual conservation efforts. You know, there are, if we have, bringing it back to the positive list, let's say, there are going to be animals that don't make it onto the positive list, that maybe there is a need for conservation work from breeding. And you know, most positive lists that are in Europe have some kind of permit or certification scheme for particular premises or maybe particular individuals that can do this responsibly. And that's again, it's a very difficult system to manage properly, but that is a much more responsible approach to this conservation need. And sometimes there may be a need. Because as you mentioned before, humans have caused all these terrible problems, and we might not be able to solve that in time. And it's a tragedy. Even when a gene goes extinct, it's a tragedy. So let alone a whole species or a local population. It's terrible. And so within the system of regulating the pet trade better, you can actually more responsibly have this conservation efforts happening. But it's a bit of a minefield of of potential ethical concerns, and it deserves a big conversation. It deserves a big argument. And you know, if anybody says that a positive list would prevent this from happening, they're wrong. I mean, a positive list can be designed in a way to allow responsible ownership under very strict conditions. So yeah, it's a very interesting conversation and a difficult question.
Thank you, Nick, for coming and talking about positive list. I really hope that very quickly it will be everywhere in Europe, and I hope it will be here in Estonia. So, and thank you for everyone who listened and thought with us.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'll just let you know that there is an event coming on the 23rd of March this year. It will be online, and I'll send you the link. Maybe if you can send it out. It's an in-person event, but there'll be a live feed that people can watch. And it's our opportunity to demonstrate to key experts in the European Union this idea of the EU-wide positive list, and all the benefits, all the legal feasible ways that it can happen and should happen. And especially, just to finish, the European Commission is going to do a study on the benefits of a positive list. And so we need to make sure that the European Commission does that study properly. Because, you know, it's very easy for a study to be done incorrectly or not as well as it should be. And you can find findings and go, oh, positive list is too difficult. Yeah. And actually, they need to make sure that they assess every feasible way of doing a positive list, because there are plenty. Yeah.
Thank you. I will then also share that link, so this information would go quicker, more far.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.